Hey guys, welcome to Karenology. You won't believe how far some people will go to cause trouble.
My name is Alex Martin, and I never thought I'd end up in a battle for my own driveway. The neighborhood was supposed to be my sanctuary, a peaceful escape from the chaos of the city. When I bought my home 3 years ago, it came with the unspoken promise of tranquility. That promise shattered the moment I returned from work one evening to find a fountain planted dead center in my driveway. It wasn't just any fountain. This monstrosity stood nearly 6 feet tall, with elaborate carvings of cherubs spouting water into a basin surrounded by tacky mosaic tiles. Water gushed from its spouts, creating a steady stream that splashed onto the concrete and pooled at the base. For a moment, I thought I'd taken a wrong turn and stumbled onto a movie set. But no, this was my home, and someone had decided that my driveway was the perfect spot for their decorative nightmare. I parked my car on the street, fuming as I stormed up to my door. A bright yellow envelope taped to the front read, "Notice from the Greenridge Homeowner Association." With trembling hands, I ripped it open. Inside was a letter welcoming me to the neighborhood's Community Beautification Initiative and a bill for $2,000 to $500 for installation fees and monthly water usage. "What the hell is this?" I muttered, pacing the length of my living room. This had to be a mistake. I hadn't agreed to any beautification initiative, let alone one that involved defacing my property. Determined to get answers, I dialed the number listed on the letter. "Greenridge Homeowner Association, this is Karen speaking. How can I assist you?" Her voice was saccharine sweet, with the condescension of someone who had all the power. I gripped the phone tighter. "Hi, this is Alex Martin. I just got home to find a fountain in my driveway. I didn't authorize this, and I want it removed immediately." There was a pause, followed by a faint chuckle. "Oh, Mr. Martin, the fountain is part of our effort to increase property values in the neighborhood. It's a shared feature for everyone to enjoy. It's on my driveway, Karen. You can't just do that without asking." Her tone hardened. "The association has the authority to make improvements on communal property." "Communal property, it's my driveway." I was shouting now, but I didn't care. "The driveway falls under the homeowner association's jurisdiction, as outlined in your agreement," she said, her smugness practically oozing through the phone. "I suggest you review the rules before making any further complaints." She hung up before I could respond. That night, I pored over the homeowner association's bylaws, trying to find any clause that justified this madness. The legal jargon was dense, but one thing became clear. The association had written the rules to favor themselves at every turn. They could practically do whatever they wanted under the guise of community improvement. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of laughter outside. A group of neighbors had gathered around the fountain, taking pictures and chatting as if this was a perfectly normal addition to the neighborhood. I stepped outside, trying to keep my temper in check. "Enjoying the new fountain?" one of them asked with a wide grin. "No, I'm not," I snapped. "This is my driveway, not a park." The crowd fell silent, and a woman stepped forward. Karen White, the president of the Homeowner Association. She was in her mid-50s, impeccably dressed, with a clipboard tucked under her arm. Her smile was anything but friendly. "Mr. Martin, I understand your concerns," she said in a tone that implied the exact opposite. "But this project was approved by the board, and it's for the benefit of everyone. You can't just hijack my property and then charge me for it." Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. "I'd be happy to discuss this further at our next board meeting. Until then, I suggest you refrain from creating a scene." "You haven't seen a scene yet, Karen." Over the next week, the situation escalated. I refused to pay the bill, which led to a second notice threatening legal action. When I tried to block access to the fountain by parking my car in the driveway, a tow truck arrived within hours to remove it. The association claimed I was obstructing community property. One evening, as I stood in my front yard fuming over the latest notice, a neighbor approached me. Her name was Sarah, and she'd lived in Greenridge for over a decade. "They did the same thing to me a few years ago," she said quietly. "They planted a flower bed in my front yard and charged me for the upkeep. When I complained, they fined me for unmaintained landscaping." "How did you deal with it?" I asked. She hesitated, glancing around nervously. "I paid. It was easier than fighting them. But you might have a chance. There are rumors about Karen and her ties to the contractors. If you can prove anything shady, you might be able to stop her." Her words lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to back down. If Karen and her cronies thought they could bully me into submission, they had another thing coming. The first step was gathering evidence. Late one night, I installed a security camera facing the fountain. If they were going to keep harassing me, I needed proof. A few days later, I got exactly what I was looking for. The footage showed Karen meeting with a man in construction gear near the fountain. They shook hands, exchanged an envelope, and left in opposite directions. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I knew confronting Karen directly wouldn't get me anywhere. Instead, I decided to rally the neighbors. If Sarah had been a victim, there were bound to be others. Together, we might stand a chance against the homeowner association. Little did I know the battle was only beginning. The footage from my security camera was enough to ignite a spark of determination, but it wasn't nearly enough to bring Karen and her homeowner association cronies to justice. I needed more evidence, and I needed allies, neighbors who were as fed up as I was. The question was, who would stand up to Karen? The first step was reaching out to Sarah again. I knocked on her door late one evening, careful not to attract attention. She answered hesitantly, glancing over her shoulder as if Karen herself might be lurking in the shadows. "What do you want, Alex?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've got proof," I said, holding up my phone. "Karen's been meeting with contractors. There's money changing hands." Sarah's eyes widened, and she pulled me inside. "You're serious?" I played the video for her, and as she watched, her expression shifted from surprise to grim determination. "This is big," she said. "But it's not enough. We need to connect the dots. Show that she's using association funds for her own benefit." "Do you know anyone else who's been targeted?" I asked. Sarah hesitated before nodding. "There's a couple on Birch Lane. The homeowner association fined them for having the wrong shade of blue on their shutters. And the Petersons. They were forced to pay for a sidewalk repair that wasn't even on their property." It was a start. The next few days were a blur of covert meetings and whispered conversations. The more neighbors I spoke to, the clearer the pattern became. Karen was using her position to strong-arm residents into paying for unnecessary projects, many of which were carried out by a single construction company, Ridgecrest Builders. One night, I decided to pay Ridgecrest a visit. Their office was a modest building on the outskirts of town, closed for the evening but not entirely deserted. A light glowed in one of the back rooms, and a sleek black car, eerily similar to the one from my footage, was parked outside. I waited until the coast was clear before approaching the building. Peering through the window, I saw Karen sitting at a table with the man from the video. They were poring over what looked like blueprints, and a stack of cash lay between them. My heart pounded as I fumbled for my phone to record the scene, but just as I hit record, Karen looked up. Our eyes met for a split second before I ducked out of sight. My pulse thundered in my ears as I crept back to my car, praying she hadn't recognized me. The following day, a notice appeared on my door. Mandatory inspection, compliance with community standards. It was clearly retaliation, but I refused to be intimidated. If anything, it only strengthened my resolve. During the inspection, a team of homeowner association representatives, led by Karen herself, combed through every inch of my property. They cited me for a dozen violations, ranging from overgrown grass to a crack in my driveway. Each citation came with a hefty fine. "You're grasping at straws, Karen," I said, crossing my arms as she handed me the list of fines. She smiled thinly. "We're simply ensuring that all residents comply with the rules. It's nothing personal, Mr. Martin." "Like hell it isn't," I snapped. "This is about the fountain, and you know it." Her smile faltered, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned and left, her entourage trailing behind her. That night, I called an emergency meeting of the neighbors I'd spoken to. We gathered in Sarah's living room, the air thick with tension and determination. "We can't let her get away with this," I said, pacing the room. "She's lining her pockets while we're footing the bill." "But what can we do?" someone asked. "She's got the board, the bylaws, and half the neighborhood on her side." "Not for long," I said, holding up my phone. I'd managed to clean up the footage and enhance the audio. Now Karen's voice was unmistakable as she discussed kickbacks and inflated invoices with the contractor. The room buzzed with whispered conversations as I played the video. By the time it ended, the mood had shifted from uncertainty to resolve. "We'll take this to the media," Sarah said. "If the rest of the neighborhood sees this, they'll turn on her." "And if they don't?" someone asked. I clenched my jaw. "Then we'll take her to court." The next morning, we began distributing flyers inviting residents to a community meeting. Karen, predictably, caught wind of our plans. She showed up at my door, flanked by two board members. Cancel the meeting, she said, her voice low and dangerous. It's not in your best interest to proceed. Is that a threat? I asked, and stepping closer. She didn't flinch. Considerate advice. You're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Martin. The only game I'm playing is the one where I expose you for the fraud you are. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty. Without another word, she turned and left, but her warning lingered like a dark cloud. As the day of the meeting approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen had something up her sleeve. And I was right. The day of the community meeting arrived, and the tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Flyers had been circulated, whispers had spread, and everyone knew something big was about to happen. Karen's shadow loomed large over the proceedings, but I was determined to see this through. We held the meeting at the local community center. Chairs were arranged in tight rows, and a projector was set up at the front. Neighbors filed in hesitantly, their expressions ranging from curiosity to apprehension. Sarah and I had rehearsed our presentation meticulously, ensuring every detail of Karen's schemes was laid bare. As the room filled, Karen entered, flanked by her usual entourage of board members. Her expression was unreadable, but her presence alone was enough to send a chill through the crowd. She took a seat near the back, her arms crossed and her eyes fixed on me. I took a deep breath and stepped to the front of the room. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, we're here to discuss some serious issues concerning the Homeowner Association and its leadership. Sarah clicked the first slide, and the projector lit up with an image of the fountain on my driveway. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This is where it started, I said. A fountain installed without my consent, followed by a bill I never agreed to. But what I discovered goes far beyond a single incident. The next slides showed the video footage of Karen's meeting with the contractor, the cash exchange, and the blueprints. Gasps filled the room as neighbors leaned forward, straining to catch every detail. This is Ridgecrest Builders, I continued, the same company responsible for almost every project approved by the Homeowner Association in the past 3 years. Projects funded by our dues with inflated invoices and kickbacks to certain individuals. All eyes turned to Karen, who sat rigidly in her chair. For the first time, she looked less like the untouchable queen of the neighborhood and more like someone caught in a trap. As the presentation continued, more neighbors began to speak up. Stories of unfair fines, unexplained fees, and suspicious construction projects emerged. It was clear that Karen's reign of manipulation had left no one untouched. She fined me $500 for a missing fence post, one man said angrily, then hired Ridgecrest to replace it for another $200. They told us we couldn't park in our own driveway, another woman added, but they installed those beautification projects right where we're supposed to park. The room buzzed with indignation, but Karen finally rose to her feet. Her voice cut through the noise like a whip. This is nothing more than a smear campaign, she said, her tone icy. These accusations are baseless, and this so-called evidence is circumstantial at best. The board has always acted in the best interest of this community. I stepped forward, meeting her glare head-on. Then why don't you explain the cash in this video? Or the inflated invoices? Or the fact that Ridgecrest has no other clients outside of this neighborhood? For a moment, Karen faltered, but then her expression hardened. I don't owe you an explanation, Mr. Martin. This meeting is over. As Karen stormed out, a few of her loyal supporters followed, but the majority of the room remained. Sarah took the opportunity to pass around a petition demanding an independent audit of the Homeowner Association's finances. By the end of the night, nearly every resident had signed it. It felt like a victory, but the war was far from over. The following morning, retaliation came swiftly. I woke up to find my mailbox stuffed with violation notices, weeds in the garden, an unapproved color on my front door, and even a complaint about the excessive height of my grass. The fines totaled over $3,000. When I called Sarah, I learned she'd received similar notices. So had every neighbor who had signed the petition. It was a coordinated attack, and it was meant to break us. But instead of breaking, we doubled down. Together, we pooled our resources and hired a lawyer. He advised us to file an injunction against the Homeowner Association, which would force them to halt all fines and new projects until the audit was complete. The injunction was granted, and for the first time, Karen's power was checked. But she wasn't about to go down quietly. A week later, I came home to find a group of workers digging up my front yard. When I demanded to know what they were doing, one of them shrugged. Installing a new drainage system. Orders from the Homeowner Association. Furious, I filmed the scene and sent it to our lawyer. He filed a cease and desist order that same day. The battle lines were drawn, and it was clear that Karen was prepared to escalate the conflict to any level necessary to maintain her control. The neighborhood was now a powder keg, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before it exploded. The cease and desist order temporarily halted Karen's aggressive tactics, but the damage was already done. My yard was a mess, the trenches from the unauthorized drainage system snaking across the grass like scars. The neighborhood buzzed with rumors and tension as residents wondered what Karen's next move would be. I didn't have to wait long to find out. One morning, a letter arrived in the mail from a law firm representing the homeowner association. The letter accused me of defamation and inciting unrest among community members. It demanded that I retract my statements and pay $10,000 in damages. Failure to comply, it warned, would result in a lawsuit. Sarah and I met with our lawyer that afternoon. "This is a scare tactic," he said, flipping through the letter. "They're trying to silence you, but we'll counter with a stronger case." His confidence was reassuring, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen still had tricks up her sleeve. That night, the feeling of being watched became unbearable. Security cameras around my property captured shadows moving near the fountain and muffled voices in the dark. When I checked the footage the next morning, I found evidence of tampering. Someone had tried to disable the cameras. I shared the footage with the group of neighbors who had joined our cause. "She's escalating," I told them. "We need to be ready for anything." We decided to install additional cameras and organize a nightly watch to protect our properties. It felt surreal, as though we were preparing for battle in what should have been a quiet suburban neighborhood. But the truth was, Karen's reign had turned our lives into a war zone. Days later, the audit results finally came in. What we uncovered was worse than any of us had imagined. The financial records revealed that Karen and her board had been funneling thousands of dollars into personal accounts through inflated contracts with Ridgecrest builders. The fountain on my driveway alone had cost 3 times more than similar installations in nearby communities. Armed with this evidence, we called another community meeting. This time, we invited local reporters to attend. The room was packed, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Sarah and I presented the findings, showing slides of the financial discrepancies and highlighting the connections between Karen and Ridgecrest builders. The reporters scribbled furiously as the crowd erupted in outrage. Karen sat in the back, her face a mask of cold fury. When it was her turn to speak, she tried to defend herself, claiming the audit was flawed and accusing us of fabricating evidence. But the crowd wasn't buying it. "How do you explain the money in your account, Karen?" someone shouted. "What about the kickbacks?" another neighbor demanded. For the first time, Karen looked genuinely cornered. But instead of addressing the questions, she stood and stormed out, her entourage scrambling to follow. The fallout from the meeting was immediate. The local news picked up the story, broadcasting Karen's corruption to the entire town. The homeowner association board members began resigning one by one, leaving Karen increasingly isolated. But instead of stepping down, she doubled down. Within days, Karen filed a countersuit against the group of neighbors leading the charge against her, claiming emotional distress and damages to her reputation. It was a desperate move, and it only served to further galvanize the neighborhood against her. Our lawyer assured us that the countersuit was baseless, but it still meant more time, money, and stress. As the weeks dragged on, the pressure began to take its toll. Some neighbors started to waver, questioning whether the fight was worth it. But I refused to back down. Karen had underestimated us, and she would pay for what she'd done to our community. One evening, as I reviewed the latest legal documents with Sarah, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop now or you'll regret it." I showed the message to Sarah, and she frowned. "She's trying to scare you. Don't let her." But the message rattled me. Karen was clearly willing to go to any lengths to protect her empire. The question was, how far was I willing to go to bring her down? The answer came the following week, when a whistleblower from Ridgecrest Builders contacted our lawyer. He claimed to have inside information about Karen's dealings, including forged documents and hidden accounts. If his claims were true, it would be the final nail in Karen's coffin. We arranged a meeting with the whistleblower at a neutral location. As he laid out the evidence, it became clear that Karen's corruption ran even deeper than we'd thought. She had used her position to manipulate contracts, embezzle funds, and intimidate anyone who got in her way. The whistleblower's testimony gave us the leverage we needed. With his help, we filed a formal complaint with the state attorney general, opening a criminal investigation into Karen and the homeowner association. The neighborhood was on edge as we awaited the outcome. Karen's countersuit was dismissed, and she seemed to retreat into the shadows, no longer showing her face at community events. But I knew better than to assume the fight was over. Karen wasn't the type to go down without a final act of defiance. Little did I know that act was already in motion. The criminal investigation into Karen and the homeowner association was underway, but the tension in the neighborhood was at a breaking point. Though Karen had retreated from public view, her influence was still palpable. Rumors swirled that she was planning a final move to crush her opposition, and I knew I couldn't afford to let my guard down. The first sign of her retaliation came in the form of a sudden power outage across several houses, mine included. The utility company claimed it was a technical issue, but my security cameras captured footage of unmarked trucks parked near the transformers late at night. When I shared the evidence with the neighbors, it was clear Karen was behind it. Her aim was to intimidate and isolate us, but instead it strengthened our resolve. The whistleblower from Ridgecrest Builders, who had become a crucial ally, provided more damning evidence. Signed contracts, falsified financial statements, and emails directly implicating Karen in the embezzlement scheme. We handed everything over to the Attorney General, who assured us that charges would soon follow. Still, the waiting game was agonizing. As the days passed, Karen's desperation became more apparent. Flyers began appearing on doors, accusing me and the other organizers of destroying the community and endangering property values. The accusations were baseless, but the smear campaign caused division among the residents. Some began to distance themselves, fearful of becoming Karen's next target. One evening, while reviewing documents with Sarah, my phone buzzed with an alert. My cameras had detected movement near the fountain. I pulled up the live feed and saw two figures pouring what looked like cement into the fountain's water lines. It was an act of sabotage meant to frame me. I called the police, who arrived just in time to catch the vandals in the act. To no one's surprise, they confessed to being hired by Karen. The arrest added fuel to the ongoing investigation, and within days, a warrant was issued for Karen's arrest. The news of Karen's arrest spread like wildfire. She was charged with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, along with several counts of harassment. Her allies on the board were implicated as well, leading to a complete overhaul of the homeowner association's leadership. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt a glimmer of hope. With Karen out of the picture, the fountain was finally removed from my driveway, and the violations against me and my neighbors were rescinded. The association's new leadership promised transparency and accountability, vowing to rebuild the trust Karen had destroyed. The battle had taken its toll, but it had also brought the community together in a way I never thought possible. Neighbors who once avoided each other now worked side by side to repair the damage Karen had caused. The fight had been long and grueling, but it was worth it to see justice served. As I stood in my driveway watching the last remnants of the fountain being hauled away, Sarah walked up beside me. "We did it," she said, a smile breaking through the exhaustion. "Yeah," I replied, letting out a breath I felt I'd been holding for months. "We really did." The driveway was empty, but it felt full of possibility. A blank slate for a neighborhood ready to start fresh. Karen's reign was over, and while the scars of her corruption would take time to heal, we had proven that even against the most entrenched systems, a community united could prevail.